What's your story of the dumbest coworker you've ever had the privilege of working with? Crash test Kevin. The guy was amazingly accident prone. I worked with him over the course of nearly 2 years. And it was simply amazing to watch. We were environmental field techs, performing field testing work on landfills. He dropped his car keys into a groundwater monitoring well. I don't even know how you do that. But he managed to do it. There is no way to recover your car keys from a 400-foot deep groundwater monitoring well. And to this day, I do not know if the keys would cause the water to come back hot, meaning a failed sample. He would forget when he placed his soil or water samples on top of his truck and would drive off, destroying the samples, meaning he would have to work late to collect them all over again. This was a regular occurrence. I seriously could type up dozens of examples of his stupidity, but I think you get the idea. A call center job. New employees coming in all the time because the old ones quit so fast. It was a legitimately awful job. He finished a week-long training program with the rest of his incoming class. The GM came in to congratulate them all, give a short speech, etc. Our guy announced to the entire class and the man running the company that he hadn't had lunch yet, then pulled out a burger and started munching on it. His first day of actual work. He left for 2 hours in the middle of the day to open a bank account without telling anyone. These were just the things I heard about. There were more. At the end of his 60-day trial period, he was informed that his services wouldn't be needed and he was free to pursue other employment opportunities. He got down on his knees, crying, and begged for another chance. The HR lady was so embarrassed. She gave him one. The next day he got into a screaming argument with a customer over the definition of a word and had to be dragged away from his desk by security because he wouldn't go willingly and he was audible to other customers calling for help. I have no how she even got into the program. We worked in anesthesia. Our supervisor told her she had to get rid of her acrylic nails for obvious medical reasons. She was told before she started she couldn't have them. To take them off, she put nail polish remover in the only cup she could find, which was styrofoam, and put it in the microwave because the heat would make the polish melt faster. Microwave was ruined and she burned all the tips of her fingers. She should not be in a medical field. She also turned to me after completing the basic CPR class and said, "Do you feel confident saving someone?" I don't. How many breaths do we do again? Plus I don't want to put my mouth of someone else's. I don't know. They give us one-way valves to carry with us for that purpose. She thought it was a duck call. Summer job during college. Working assembly line. My job was to put 2 screws into each item that came down the line. Everyone else had a similarly mind-numbing task. We'd all have been replaced by robots by now. About once a week someone would bring in a rubber snake or spider and put it into a part coming down the line. When the part made it to Janet would scream. She would pick out the spider with her fingernails and put it on the line next to the part. Then the line would move and the spider would come to me. I would wait until she wasn't looking and throw the spider back up the line to a guy that would put the rubber spider into a part and send it down the line. Janet would scream every time. For an 8-hour shift. We had an invoice that needed to be paid within 120 days. Dated a few months back. She pulled up a calendar and started counting days one by one. She looked at me and said, "Are we really about to count to 120? Double quote. I took the calendar and added up the days in each month, plus the day of the month it currently was. She looked at me wide-eyed and very genuinely said, "Wow, you're really smart." Double quote. She had no sense of diet, and that's fair. Some people don't get that information. Sadly, she was then diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and decided to make major changes. First, she was going to eat more fruit and less candy. So she came into work and saw that I was tired and said, "Mukul, you look tired. That's low blood sugar." It was 4:30 am. "Here, have some fruit." She opens her purse, which is completely filled with Laffy Taffy banana flavor. She also switched to only drinking orange soda all day. Again the fruit. She was constantly having blood sugar issues and wouldn't listen any of us idiots about how she's just piling sugar into herself. It was fruit, you dummies. Worked at a retail store. One gentleman who had been working there for a few years was working the register. We sold big appliances. A couple comes in to buy a washer and dryer with cash, $100 bills. My coworker marks every bill with one of those counterfeit pens. If the bills are fake, it will be a dark color, and if they are real they will be yellowish. Well, everyone turned black and he called the police. Police came. Turns out my coworker used a permanent marker and not the counterfeit pen to check each $100 bills. I worked in a warehouse that sorted vegetables for various grocery stores and restaurants with a guy named Bing. He was about 50. Since the warehouse was full of boxes of fruit and vegetables, it got pretty ripe smelling. To combat the stench of rotting food, there was a massive fan, some 10 feet high. For some reason, there was no cover over it. So these giant metal blades were whizzing around all day, completely open. We'd often throw things at it, like watermelons. They would get completely destroyed. And it was fantastic. One day, after throwing a particularly juicy watermelon in, Ping decided he'd show off, again, about 50 years old, to the new secretary by putting his head in the fan. It nearly cut his ear off, shattered his orbital, and broke a bunch of his teeth. Way better than the watermelons. She wasn't dumb by any means, just incredibly naive. I was training her to be a server at a sit-down fast food joint. My shoe came untied and I pretended to be upset. She asked why and I told her I couldn't find Velcro shoes that were non-slip. She then tied my shoes, kind of like a fast food Jesus would do. I always FK'd with people as much as I could get away with, but she was genuinely trying to help. She eventually worked her ass off and she would FCK with me as often as possible, so I guess it worked out well. The dumbest person I worked with at that job was the one that quit her job while homeless because her unemployed boyfriend wouldn't let his pregnant girlfriend work in a place where he couldn't watch her the entire shift. Management banned him because he would spend 8-hour shifts watching her and yelling at her if she talked to male customers or employees. I hope upon hope they put that kid up for adoption. Bobby. Working as a valet at a hotel. Whenever someone needed their car from the garage, we would drive another car to the garage, park it, then bring up the car that was requested. Wasn't much organization, so you pretty much would park wherever you could find a spot, then wander around the garage and find the car you were looking for. Bobby was tasked with this one day. Drove to the garage, got out of the car, wandered around for a little bit, then brought back the same car he parked, because he forgot which one was which. I had a coworker who carefully crafted an email to a friend disparaging the prospects for the company and its stock. He then sent it to the entire company, including the CEO and the entire board of directors. Realizing his mistake, he tried in vain to recall the missive. Shortly thereafter his phone rang and he headed off to the CEO's office at a brisk pace. The look on his face was one of someone whose life had taken a turn for the worse. We next saw him a half hour later carrying an empty box and escorted by someone from HR. 20 minutes later he was out the door, never to return. Worked as overnight stocker at a home improvement store. We had a guy who would operate our order picker, a fork truck with a rising platform instead of forks to put things like water heaters, refrigerators, etc. away. Instead of pushing the bulky stock onto the shelves while in the air, he would step onto the shelves and pull the product onto it, only to get himself stuck between the beams of the shelf and the product itself. It would become an almost weekly occurrence where we would have to grab some ladders, climb up the shelf, and get him unstuck. To this day I have no idea why he didn't get his license taken away. Mayo. So I work for my local town's park and recreation department and have been since my sophomore year of high school. Well, last year after I graduated high school, 3 of my friends and I drove to Florida for a whole week, live in NC, and during that time I managed to lose the keys to our town work truck, the credit card and the lids to several machines. According to my coworker and longtime friend, whom my brother and I got hired on, said I had lost all of those working with him that week. Dumb CNT forgot that I was in Florida lol. And our boss knew that. I worked in a restaurant with a girl who fit the description. One day in the daylight basement where the prep kitchen and walk-in fridge are. She was slicing tomatoes. I came down to get something from the walk-in. And she immediately started yelling at me to shut the door and not let the cold air into the room. That she was freezing. And had been wearing a sweater all day. This is winter in Oregon. So yeah, it's f-king cold sometimes. Then I notice the window behind her is open. The large, completely open window that is directly behind her is wide open. She could have fallen out of it. When I mentioned this, she just kind of stared at it for a second and said, "Oh, yeah, I guess so." They worked in the deli attached to the store I work at, and two of my favorite stories were when they, repeatedly, cook chickens with their plastic wrapping still on them. And when taking a full tray of sausages out of the oven they walked to the hot counter. Saw it was rather full and instead of moving stuff around to make space just walked straight to the bin and dumped the whole tray. Didn't understand why that wasn't the right thing to do. I work at a law firm and one of our legal secretaries was putting paper in the shredder in the back room for months before anyone realized she had been feeding paper into one of those big metal grey electrical boxes that has 100 warning stickers with lightning bolts all over them indicating a fire and electric shock hazard. I don't know what the box does tbh. That's a transformer and it gets hot. Not necessarily hot enough to burn paper. Until some dumber stuffs it full and prevents air from circulating and cooling it. The slots she was stuffing paper into are intended to allow airflow and prevent idiots from getting killed by shoving their fingers in. There's always a level of burning the entire building down stupidity that can't be designed away. I had a coworker once who came into work really upset one night. I asked her what was wrong and she said someone had stolen her identity. I expressed sympathy for her and asked if she knew how it had happened. I had no idea if she had lost her card or there was some sort of data leakage. So she tells me she's home alone one night when the phone rings. It was an employee from Windows and he said that there was something wrong with her computer and he can help her fix it. He just needed some information to get into her account. So she gave it to him. I never thought anyone could actually fall for that scam. I worked at a small collection agency. They hired an hour person and she was interesting. On Veterans Day, she made a poster to celebrate the employees that were former military. It said something like, "We honor and salute you." I emailed her and let her know the poster had honor misspelled as honor. She went on about how she has a college education and I don't and how dare I. Blah blah blah. Now the email I sent her was to actually help her so she wouldn't be embarrassed. But she was a haughty, "I am better than you" btch about it. So I sarcastically conceded and agreed that my lack of college degree proves I am wrong. About 10 minutes later, she fixed the misspelling after several of our veterans pointed out her mistake. Rob wasn't very bright. Like one of our co-workers suggested toothpaste and ketchup make great masturbatory lubricants and he came to work the next day and told us about his experience. He also showed him how to give himself a BJ and he injured himself. Additionally, one time he got a tiny bit of nitric acid on his smock. So he stripped down completely naked and was taking a shower in the emergency shower. My then female supervisor happened to be walking by and noticed him, huge saucer eyes. Was hilarious. And asked me why Rob was naked taking a shower and asked that I go check it out. Yeah. Probably one of the dumbest non-disabled people I have ever met. Software engineer here. In SQL there's a function called coalesce, which is used when you have one or more inputs and need to ensure that whatever is returned is not null. It's very helpful. Well, worked with a guy who was absolutely terrible both personally and technically. He loved talking about the above mentioned function. Like his knowing about it was a badge of honor or something. Except that he called it the coalesce function. Consistently. The fact that he misspoke was funny enough. And probably also forgivable. Were Coalesce not the brand name of stool softener? So that guy. Oh man. This freaking girl I worked with was so dumb. We worked at Disney working on a ride. And whenever our fire alarm would go off, which happened a lot, like way too much, we had to evac everyone from the building and cycle out the ride vehicles that were still out on the track with guests on them. Aka have them automatically come back to the station so we could unload the guests. We're supposed to stay calm and tell people that we're having technical difficulties. Very rarely does Disney evac the whole building for technical difficulties BTW if the whole building clears out including the queue line. There's a bigger problem for your information. This BTCH did not do any of that. So, she was at main console, Aka was in charge of the ride, when the fire alarm starts blinking. She freaks out. She slams down on the E-stop, which shuts off all power to the ride and turns the damn lights on. Guests are like WTF. No one on dock knows what just happened BC she didn't call anyone to say we had a signal 25, fire. So none of us know WTF is going on. But lights are on and E-stop is pressed. So we gotta get these people out of the building and off the ride. But then we find out that what actually happened was a fire and she shut off all power to the ride. Which means that the ride has stopped and the guests on it are potentially burning to death out on the ride with the fire. And we have to go onto the track in the possible fire and go get them. We were so pissed. And the whole time this BTCH is panicking and freaking guests out. A coordinator comes up and asked WTF is going on and we explain. And I swear he was gonna wring her neck. Thankfully, the fire wasn't anything serious and we were able to get the guests off alright, but damn, everyone was pissed. I used to work with this guy who was the world's biggest compulsive liar. It was insane the stuff this guy said. We live in Alaska. And he claimed to be friends with a ton of celebrities. Not only that, but all completely different celebrities. He said he was friends with Kevin Hart, Kobe Bryant, Seth Rogen, Lil Jon. Just a huge plethora of random people that I know he's never even met. He also claimed he had millions of dollars tied up in some bank account that a bunch of different people screwed him out of. So all of the money was just sitting there but he couldn't access it. Then there were the stories he told daily about having threesomes every night. Countless health problems he claimed to have. All of these crazy, horrible things that happened to him because he just has such bad luck. The works. The craziest part of the whole thing was that he either A, believed all of these insane things he was saying, or B, thought that what he was saying was believable enough that other people would believe it. The whole thing was just wild. Not my story. But my friend used to work at a famous toy store that went out of business years ago. She was a manager and was in the back doing some paperwork and an employee nervously approached her saying he wasn't sure if he should take the money a costumer gave him. My friend asked what was wrong with the money and he showed it to her. It was black and white. And only was printed on one side. She came out to tell the guy he would not be getting the PlayStation he was trying to buy and the guy just snatched it and ran. I knew a woman that would disinfect her keyboard every morning. Like spray her computer with a cleaning solution and wipe it down like she was scrubbing a toilet. Not long after, she complained to IT that several of her keys were no longer working. I had a coworker once who got into the habit of writing notes for herself in Sharpie on her CRT screen and later wiping them off with alcohol. Actually, is coworker the right word for someone who works at another office? Who you've only met once in 10 years. Whatever the right word is. She was one of those to me. She continued doing this after IT switched her over to an LCD screen, which is a plastic membrane instead of glass. After a few days she complained that the image was getting wavy. Had someone new start who had some experience. I spent, literally, months repeating myself about the most basic shit and finally had enough, so told her if she has trouble remembering she should write things down. You know, like normal people would. She then proceeded to call me a BTCH in Pig Latin to her friend over the phone in earshot of me. I stepped out to call my SO half laughing because this 44-year-old grown-ass woman used Pig Latin thinking I, a 25-year-old at the time, wouldn't understand what she was saying. Did I mention her job was piss easy? She took less than a quarter of my workload. I could do her job in an hour. Main reason she was hired was so that whenever I was on leave vacation there was someone there to do my work without it being stressful and vice versa. She lasted in the job 9 months. 9 months too f***ing long.